Is the biggest takeaway from fall camp that Coach Petrino will indeed call plays for the Aggies this season?
You are Locked On Aggies, your daily podcast on the Texas A&M Aggies. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome on into Locked On Aggies. I'm your host, Andrew Stefaniak. Thanks for making Locked On Aggies your first listen every single day. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Today, we are joined by former Aggie defensive lineman Jay Arnold. Jay, thanks for being here, buddy. How are you?
I'm doing all right, Andrew. Thanks again for having me. It's always fun to hop on here and chop it up and talk about the Aggies.
Now, of course, I agree with you. And also, congrats, recently engaged. I just want to say, congrats on that, buddy. I just want to.
Yeah, I appreciate it. You know, I did it at the top of a mountain. We took a ski lift to get up there, and that was easily the most nerve-wracking ski lift ride of my life.
I believe it. I believe it. I do. So, fall camp, it's kind of wrapped up. We're now getting into real gameplay, the start of the season, getting ready to rock and roll for the New Mexico game. And I was kind of sitting and thinking, what are the biggest takeaways from fall? What do we feel about? And you and I talked before we pressed the record button. I feel like of all the stuff that happened, some injuries, some question marks, different positions, I still think knowing that Coach Petrino is going to take care of this offense and call the plays is my biggest takeaway from fall camp.
Yeah, I mean, I was kind of reticent to believe that the offense would be better until we heard from Bobby Petrino about what the offensive plan was going to look like. And in his press conference at the beginning of fall camp, he talked about his offensive philosophy. He talked that he's going to be the play caller. And he also talked about how part of his philosophy, which is the FTS, Feed the Studs philosophy, is adapting to your players. And I think my biggest complaint with Jimbo Fisher so far through his tenure at A&M is that he hasn't really adapted his offense to the players. So Bobby Petrino coming out and saying that his plan is to adapt to what A&M has, and there are a ton of offensive weapons for A&M to take advantage of. Hearing him come out and say that gives me a lot more confidence in this team. There's still some issues, right, that need to be shored up, but the offense struggling last year was a big part of the problem and why A&M had a disappointing season. So hearing Bobby Petrino say that they're going to adapt this offense to the talent that A&M has is a refreshing thing to hear.
I agree with you. I love the Feed the Studs. We talked about it here on the show. I love that mentality. I think I see this more in the NFL than I almost do college, but it's like when let's say you're the Vikings, right? Why are we throwing to KJ Osborne? Well, why are we doing that? Feed Justin Jefferson. And I get it. You have to spread the ball around a little bit, but I notice it more in the NFL, but it's like you have outstanding receivers. You got Evan Stewart. You got Moose. You got Anias. You got Noah Thomas. I mean, you have one of the best wide receiver rooms in the country. You got a talented running back room, some, not totally proven guys, but I'm just glad to hear that Coach Petrino, it's a great, I agree with you. It's feed the guys that are going to put up points, that are going to be explosive, are going to find ways to get points up on the board for your team. And so hearing that's going to be how he conducts his business as the offensive coordinator, play caller for the Aggies. It excites me because I think you're going to see what Petrino has to offer, which we've seen throughout his career all over, his different stops, one of the best offensive minds in the game. But I guess to other big takeaways, one I've talked a lot about is the cornerback room. I was high on Tony Grimes. And I haven't heard much negatives I haven't heard anything negative. It hasn't been like Tony Grimes hasn't looked great, but we've heard a lot of talk about Josh DeBerry and the true freshman Jayvon Thomas. So, I mean, it's an interesting position battle as we're getting close to the start of the season.
Yeah, I think we both expected Tony Grimes to be the guy, but one of the things that, A&M was high on him coming out of high school too before he committed to North Carolina. And one of the things that I saw on film is I always saw Grimes as more of a safety type body. And I think maybe that's kind of showing up, and maybe he ends up more of a safety or a nickel. And then you have Josh DeBerry, who played some of his best college football at Boston College in the nickel position, who's really kind of surprised people stepping into the corner role. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. Obviously, Tyreek Chappelle was pretty entrenched as the starter at one of the corner spots. But, yeah, Josh DeBerry and then Jayvon Thomas, I mean, both coming in and being a little more surprising than I think the two guys that we were expecting to battle at that position in Grimes and McCall. So, and the other flip side of that too is Josh DeBerry comes in as a graduate transfer, having that experience edge. I think that's a little bit important too. And you're never going to turn down senior leadership. So I think while it's a little bit surprising that Tony Grimes maybe didn't get that corner role, you look at it and you think to yourself, and maybe you can see why it happened and why Josh DeBerry seems to be that guy getting a lot of the reps at the corner position opposite Tyreek Chappelle.
I agree with everything you said. And I mean, the funny part about it is I liked the tape on Josh DeBerry. I did. I liked the tape. I liked the experience factor. I agree with you. But there was something about McCall, the little bit of tape we saw from Florida State. He got into 8 games, didn't play a crazy amount of snaps. PFF loved him. And Tony Grimes, I mean, I kind of thought he was going to come and just revamp his career. I mean, it wasn't like he was necessarily bad at North Carolina. I wouldn't go that far to say he was bad, but he didn't live up to one of the best players in the country type potential. So I'm happy to see both those guys, because at the end of the day, this is what I always say. If Jayvon Thomas or Josh DeBerry is outplaying them and winning a spot, that's not like, you don't have to lean toward the negative of like, that means that those guys aren't playing well. Maybe that just means that Thomas and DeBerry are playing great football and they were in a position to really help this team. So that's the way I try to kind of look at it. And I feel good about that position group as a whole. And the other guy I'm excited to see is Bryce Anderson. I think he is in for a monster season.
Yeah. And, while there are some questions at corner, the safety position at A&M looks fantastic. You have the 1-2 punch of Bryce Anderson and Damani Richardson. And Damani Richardson, again, coming back is huge. So you look at what A&M has in the secondary, and there's plenty of talent there, and we'll see who ends up in the nickel spot. Because I think Durkin's probably going to have 5 DBs on the field pretty much at all times. But it'll be interesting to see where everybody lines up in week 1 and moving forward. But like you said, I mean, Bryce Anderson is he looks like he's going to be a fantastic player no matter where he ends up. Maybe he takes over that nickel spot. Maybe he slots into the safety position next to Richardson. No matter what, he's going to be on the field and he's going to be making an impact.
I agree with you, everything there. Now, I do have a question. This is, as a former player, I think this is some great insight people could get here. How much can we take away from this opening game against New Mexico? Like, you know what I mean? I'm talking about things like that. What's personnel groups going to look like? With the game against Miami, I know that they're going to want to run up the scoreboard and probably get their guys out and try and get the 2 deep in a little bit. But, I mean, what as fans can we take away from a game like that?
You can't take away a ton, but you can take away scheme. I mean, it's going to be vanilla. You're not going to have as many exotics or blitzes on the defensive side as you will later in the season. And offensively, you're probably not going to see as much eye candy, as much pre-snap motion as you will perhaps later in the season. Obviously, the trick plays, you're probably not going to break those out. But you can still get some things, like the mix and tempo that Bobby Petrino may bring offensively. You may see, like, what kind of personnel groupings you're running with defensively, as far as, are we going to go more 4-down linemen or 3-down linemen? And again, that can change from game to game based on opponent, but it'll be interesting to see kind of what both coordinators roll with as far as the basics, right? Because against New Mexico, you're probably going to go with your base groupings on both offense and defense. And I think there are going to be some changes from last year in those base groupings. And I think that's what, as a fan, you should tune into and try to notice when A&M kicks off against New Mexico on September 2nd.
I agree with you. We are going to get Jay to tell us a little bit about the defensive line and who he thinks is going to step up this year and look good this year. But first, we're going to have to talk about our friends over at Game Time. Game Time is the best place to go and get your last-minute tickets. I can't tell you how many times I've wanted to go to a ball game, and then you look at some of these other platforms to buy a ticket, and the prices are just out of this world. And you're thinking to yourself, it's the bottom of the first in a baseball game, or it's 10 minutes to game time. Why are these ticket prices not going down? Not at Game Time. They do a great job making sure that you get the best deals. Everybody wants to go to a ball game, whether it's NFL, MLB. I mean, you want to go see ball games. It's hockey. Jay, we talked about hockey last time you were on the show. Wherever you want to go, you want to get the best prices. And that's what you get at Game Time. If you're there last second, you can get some good deals that you might not get on other platforms. So I highly recommend going to check out what Game Time has to offer, downloading the app. It really is a great place to get your tickets last second and to save yourself some money, which we all need right now. Snag the tickets without the stress with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last-minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. This defensive line, Jay, it's funny, the depth of it. It is hard. I've talked about, you find me a position group in college football deeper than this Texas A&M defensive line. I mean, it's a conversation you could have. It feels like you could talk about 15 different people, it feels like, on this defensive line as a whole. And it's a unit. I think Aggie fans are excited to see how good can this unit be? What's the sack total going to be? Are we going to be able to stop the run? So those are my two questions for you. That's been a big question mark here, stopping the run. Is that going to happen? So I want to hear just your thoughts on the unit as a whole. Are they going to get pressure on the quarterback and then stopping the run?
Yeah. So the first thing I look at with this defensive line group and the issues of the run game last year, I think I talked about this last time, but A&M's defensive line wasn't really getting blown off the ball, right? Getting blown off the ball is a lot harder to fix. A lot of the problems that A&M seemed to have last year had to do with continuity and youth up front. Guys were throwing out of their gaps too early on the run. Guys were letting the quarterback break contain in scramble situations. And those things are things that can be taught and can be adapted to and can be improved upon as guys get older. So you look at all the talent that A&M has, and I think it's pretty clear that this unit should take a step forward in 2023. McKinley Jackson, again, is back as the leader, the heart and soul of the interior of the defensive line. But Walter Nolan is a name that I've heard nothing but good things about as far as improving, and he was already pretty dang good as a true freshman. He slimmed up a little bit now, should be a little bit quicker, which is frightening for opposing offensive lines, right? When you got to block two guys like Walter Nolan and McKinley Jackson, that's not fun. That's not a fun proposition. The other side of the struggle of the defensive line, sacks, right? A&M has to find a way to get pressure on the quarterback. And I look at what A&M has defensively. Fadil Diggs is obviously a very talented pass rusher when he's healthy. If he can stay healthy, I think he'll be a guy that gets a lot of sacks. And I think a guy that, maybe a little bit lower on the depth chart, but I think may see some playing time in obvious passing downs is Malick Sylla, who with a lot of length creates those kind of issues for offensive line that's hard to deal with. He uses his hands well. He has a lot of bend for a guy that's as tall as he is. And it's kind of a perfect storm for a pass rusher. But I mean, on the flip side of that too, you have a guy in Alty Overton who this was technically supposed to be his freshman year, right? He reclassified from the in his recruiting class and came in a little bit early. He's another guy that slimmed up a little bit, looks a little bit leaner, should be quicker. And again, I mean, if you're not having success rushing the passer, and a lot of the problem that A&M had last year and giving up rushing yards wasn't just the running backs, it was quarterbacks escaping the pocket. So now you have a little bit trimmer, leaner defensive line that can perhaps contain a little bit better and stay disciplined, stay in your rushing lanes, and you should get more sacks. So those are the two things. I think it really eventually just comes down to discipline, both in the run game and in the pass game, as far as improving the sack numbers and improving the amount of rushing yards you're giving up.
Yeah, I agree with you on everything there. I mean, knowing that they weren't getting blown off the ball, it does make you feel better knowing we can make these changes. It's not really I've got that dog in me kind of a problem, or it's not a strength situation. It's so knowing that, I think that's got to make Aggie fans feel better that hopefully the defensive line and is going to be able to kind of make those changes they need to before the start of the season. And that's one thing I say here a lot too, is like, people talk about, well, they were bad at it last year, they're going to be bad at it this year. I mean, no. I mean, generally, you're bad at something, you work on it to get better. And we're going to see that happen. The defensive line struggled to stop the run. That's been a focus in the offseason. So I definitely think we're going to see that improve this year. So I feel good knowing that's going to look a lot better. My next thought here is a little bit about position groups that we feel good about and we don't feel good about. I kind of want to and feel good. I feel good about the starters all around. I have two deep questions at positions like, I'd say linebacker would be the position. So for me, the positions I feel good about, I feel great about the defensive line, feel great about the receivers, and I feel pretty darn good about the secondary as a whole. But the linebackers, I like your top end guys, but the two deep, I think it gets a little thin, and I'm a little concerned there.
Yeah, echoing everything you said, the linebackers, the top two guys are good, perhaps not great, but linebackers are kind of a hard position to recruit nowadays. It's not as sexy of a position as it used to be, right? Guys either want to be in the back end or they want to be that edge rusher. Mm-hmm. So linebacker isn't necessarily the spot that guys kind of flock to. Chris Russell, Edger, and Cooper, both talented guys, but the depth is frightening. You lose a guy to transfer portal and Andre White, who I think would have been quality depth. You have Martrell Harris Jr. as the only guy in the two deep who has been in the program for a while, or at least longer than a year. True freshman Torian York came in the spring, impressed a lot of people in the spring. I think he's going to be a guy that's going to be good for this program, but you still don't necessarily want a true freshman in there at the mic, being kind of the play caller for the defense. You also have Dreonte Davis comes in as a transfer from Jackson State. I think he'll provide quality depth, but again, you don't want to see all those guys play in a ton of snaps. You want to make sure you're hoping that Russell and Cooper stay healthy, because it's a little bit thin on experience after those two.
Yeah, I agree with you. That's the position, and I like York. I like Davis. I think they're both players that can help, but I mean, Davis played at Jackson State. That's not SEC competition. And then York being a freshman, it scares you a little bit. I think they both have a bright future ahead of them, but I don't know if that future is right now. I think it's the future. So I agree with you there, but quarterback, it's an interesting question here. I've said Connor Wigman, I think is the guy. I think many agree there, but okay. We're recording this on Thursday. So this show will go up Friday morning and we still don't know who the starting quarterback is. I mean, like I say, I like to think I know, but every other school, Coach Fisher has made it sound like it is a battle. It's a quarterback battle. I never really saw it that way, and I kind of still don't. But I think if it's a battle, people generally name their starting quarterback. And it's getting to a point where I'm kind of wondering, why do we not know yet?
Yeah, I think Jimbo just kind of likes to do this. Yeah, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, that's what people have said that, and I agree with it. But it's just I don't get it. But go ahead. Go ahead.
I don't understand it either. I'm pretty confident that Connor Wegman's going to be your starter. Here's the thing. I think if you start Max Johnson, then Wegman is likely to transfer. I don't think you can afford to, especially like the way he closed out the season last year. He's still young. Yeah, he's a sophomore. If you bench him after kind of going through a rough season, closing on a high note with that win against LSU, a lot of confidence, and you bench him, you're going to shake up that confidence quite a bit. And I mean, they're going to say everything in the news or in the media about how, you're adapting to your situation. You can't really let something like that affect you, but it does affect a quarterback and it affects the growth. So I don't see a scenario in which Connor Regman is not the starter. With that being said, I'm like you. I don't understand why they won't just announce it. But I guess we'll see what happens when A&M rolls out their offense against New Mexico on September 2nd.
There you go. We are going to talk a little bit about the schedule outlook now that we are done with fall camp and getting ready to rock and roll into the season. And we might even sunshine pump a little bit. I am for sure. So we're going to talk about that, talk about a little bit of ceiling and floor coming up right here on Locked On Aggies. Last time we had you on, Jay, we talked about the ceiling and the floor. That was the main topic of the day. And I'm going to be honest with you. I've changed my ceiling a few steps on the ladder. I'm starting to get high on the Aggies. I mean, higher than I was. I'm going to be honest with you. It's just, getting to know this team better, as we got through fall camp. And I feel pretty good about the spot we're at. And I think people are down on the Aggies. National media is down on us, which I know doesn't matter. People comment that often, which is true. But my ceiling's gone up, and I just want to see, now that we're done with fall camp and the season's getting ready to get going, are you with me there, or are you not quite there?
After Bobby Petrino's press conference, I got a little bit excited, and I tend to do this every year. I mean, I'd like to separate myself from fandom, but the hope gets into me, and I just – man, I look at all the talent that A&M has, and I can't help but feel like, hey, a couple bounces go our way, and there's a lot of potential here, especially in a year where Alabama has a lot of questions, where it looks like LSU is the front runner in the SEC West, but A&M happened to beat LSU to close the season last year. All of that gives you a little bit of hope, and I'm trying to temper it with realistic expectations, but it's not working.
We don't do it here. And Locked On Aggies, we don't do that. We just let it fly. We accept it, and we're fine with it. But I mean, I think being at media days is what kind of started my sunshine pumping, just because, you get to know more about these opposing teams and players. And the way I look at this, that is the biggest key, like you said, is the Alabama game being more of a, I think you could go as far to say it's a toss-up now. I think at first I looked at it as it's Alabama. You're not supposed to win, but you could. Now I look at it as almost a toss-up game. And Tennessee's been the team. I think I asked you the question last time of the LSU, Bama, and Tennessee games. Which one do you think is the most winnable? At the time, you said Tennessee. I still lean Tennessee myself more so than Alabama. I think Tennessee's I think they're a little bit overrated, personally. I don't want that to bite me in the behind. That's just my opinion as we sit right now. But, you look at the schedule. The three tough games, I talked about how I break down the schedule. Ole Miss, you could put that into a tough game or a really tough game, any category you want. But I don't love this. This is the one thing we've talked about recently. You're of your four hardest games on the schedule, which I say are the Bama, Tennessee, Ole Miss, and LSU games, 3 or 4 are on the road. And I do not love that.
Yeah, it's tough when you get that. But on the flip side, you do get Alabama at home. I still think Tennessee is the most winnable game of those. I don't know if you want to go into full record predictions right now, but I look at it and I think a reasonable response to A&M's record is 9-3, and part of that is getting some of those difficult games on the road. I can go through and tell you which ones I have as wins, which ones as losses. I think we'll probably go step by step, but I mean, it's just a tough schedule. It's SEC, right? You get a road game to start the year against Miami, taking away the New Mexico contest. And Miami is a team that's in a similar situation to Texas A&M. I just don't know that they have the talent that Texas A&M has. But with that being said, I think that can be a little bit of a litmus test, right? Do you go on the road at Miami and take care of business? If you do, that sets the stage for a pretty good season. If you lose at Miami or stumble a little bit, things get a little bit hairy, right? So that's the game that I kind of have circled as the first test. And then you get into the meat of the SEC schedule, and who knows what may happen. But I do think I'm a little bit higher on A&M than I was last time we talked.
Yeah. I'm going to ask you a question, and then we're going to do that. I wasn't going to do that, but it's a good idea. Running through the schedule, and I'm going to say how I think it's going to turn out, and you tell me that's a good idea. We'll do that in a minute. But first of all, 9-3, I agree with you. I think that's a safe place to say I think the Aggies are going to go 9-3, and nobody's going to look at you funny. I think that's a number where I agree with you. 9-3 is kind of where I'm at. So I've talked a little bit about this. The outlook on going into that Bama game, 5-0 compared to 4-1 and 3-2. I mean, I talk about destiny in college football, and I bring up the Tennessee Bama game last year. Before that game was played, I wish I'd have put money on it, but I told my dad, I told everybody, I said, Tennessee's winning this football game. I feel it. And I think as fans, we get that. You can feel when an underdog, might win a game or at least give a team a good game that maybe shouldn't.
Or when a team feels like they're just due for
Exactly.
breaking out.
And I kind of feel that if you go into that Bama game 5-0, is that an easy ask? No. You got to beat Arkansas, Auburn, and Miami, and then, of course, the two not great non-conference teams. But how much do you look at that, the difference between going into that game 3-2/4-1 or going into it 5-0? You go into it 5-0, that's college game day, in my opinion. So I'm curious your thoughts on that.
Yeah, it's tough to think because, last time Alabama came to College Station, A&M was not doing well. They kind of limped into that game and then all of a sudden pull off the upset with Zach Calzada. But I think there's already kind of a built-in chip on A&M's shoulder from last year and the 5-7. So I think you want to go into that game undefeated if possible, because then it sets up the back half of the season to really say something. And if you go into that game undefeated, even if you lose to Alabama, it's not the end of the world, right? So it'll be interesting to see for sure. Again, I love that A&M gets Bama at home. That's, I think, a big boost. I have that game as a loss on the schedule right now, but I do think that going into it 5-0 would be a confidence boost, because the flip side of the 3-2 or 4-1, you run the risk of A&M as a program that's coming off a losing season saying, oh no, here we go again. And that can damper the fans, can damper the environment. So yeah, I'm not saying that they're definitely going to be 5-0, but the schedule sets up nice to be undefeated going into that game.
I agree with you. I agree with you. Let's run through it. I'm going to say the game. I'm going to say win-loss. You say win-loss. We'll run through it, all 12 games. Yep. New Mexico, win.
Win.
Miami, I got it as a win.
I have it as a win, but it's going to be a test.
I agree. Yeah, I agree with you there. Louisiana Monroe, obviously win.
Win.
And then Auburn, I have as a win.
Auburn, I have as a win. And if I'm an A&M fan, I'm very glad I'm catching Hugh Freeze and Auburn early in the season.
I agree with you. I see something positive coming over there in Auburn. I think they're gonna have a good year.
Seems like they got the machine kind of turning again.
Exactly, but it's a great point that we get them when we get them. I wouldn't want them week 9 or week. I just no, thank you. I agree. That's a great point. This is where I think it gets really interesting. Arkansas is a win that takes 5 years off of my life, as the game in Jerry World always does. It's a win where it's like you just you don't watch the game and hope. I mean, obviously, I'm kidding. You're going to watch the game, but it's like it's going to be a weird one. I just got a feeling about
that. A&M Arkansas game at Jerry World is always just sloppy and weird, and nobody feels good going out of it. And I'm expecting that to be the story again this year. No matter who wins, neither team is probably going to be happy.
Yeah, I agree with you. Okay, Bama, loss here.
I have this as a loss. Again, There's some things that make this winnable. Bama has some questions, but I also watched Nick Saban smiling at press conferences, which is a terrifying sight. And I just like, it always seems like whenever everybody counts out Alabama, they come back with a fury. And it feels like one of those, even though they're ranked number 4, it feels like one of those years where everybody's like, I don't know about Alabama this year, which makes me think that Alabama's going to be good.
Exactly. I agree with you. All right. Tennessee, I have it as a win. I do.
I have it as a win as well. I just think that Tennessee is going to be kind of a boom or bust team this year. They have the offensive capability still to jump on teams and kind of get on top early. I just think that A&M is going to be disciplined enough to handle it. And, as tough as that road environment is going to be in Neyland, in Knoxville, I just think that A&M has more weapons and is going to be a little bit more consistent than Tennessee.
I agree with you. South Carolina, I have as a win.
I have as a win as well. Obviously, this was one of the losses that A&M took last year that was a little bit frustrating. You had some turnovers in that game, and then you outgained South Carolina in the second half. But you get them at home, and South Carolina's lost a bit to the portal as well. So I think that A&M gets back to their winning ways against South Carolina.
Now, this one, the Ole Miss game, for me, I think that they're going to beat one between Tennessee and Ole Miss. I think they're going to win one of those and lose one of those. For some reason, I think they're going to beat Tennessee, so I'm going to put down Ole Miss as my loss. But to me, I think I'd rather say it like they're going to go 1-2 in those two games rather than who it's going to be.
Yeah, I have Ole Miss as a loss on the schedule right now too. I do think that Quinton Judkins is one of the best players in college football. I mean, he is just one of those guys that you're just excited to watch whenever he's not playing your team, and you hate to see him in the lineup whenever you do play him. But yeah, I think Ole Miss is just one of those squads that's going to be a really tough game, and it's one that I have circled as a loss for A&M going into Oxford.
I agree with you. Mississippi State, this one to me I have it as a win, but I think this one's going to be more interesting than people give it credit for, just because I'm a big Will Rogers guy personally.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see what the Mississippi State offense looks like. Obviously, in 2023, with the tragic passing of Coach Leach, but this one feels like one of those Arkansas games, right, where it's just kind of A&M is probably not going to be happy with how they look in this one. I think they squeak out a win, but it's going to be a tough one. And Mississippi State has kind of been a thorn in A&M side since they joined the SEC. So it's a game that I'm not looking forward to, but that I think A&M wins.
I agree with you. And Abilene Christian's a win.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a win.
When you at first I was like okay, that's funny. I was like, wait a minute. Yeah. I thought you were about to come in with some like crazy, like, have you seen their running back? Their running back's going to win the Heisman, and I thought you were coming at me with some crazy knowledge there. That's hilarious.
ACU baby.
There you go. And then LSU, I have it as a loss.
I have it as a loss as well. LSU looks, I mean, obviously Bama's ranked 4, LSU's 5, but I think I have LSU as the favorite in the SEC West this year. And you look at what A&M did last year, LSU's going to want revenge. Like, just call it what it is. Plus, you're going to Death Valley, which is, in my opinion, one of the toughest places to play on the planet. I think most people would agree with me there. And you just don't go into Baton Rouge and win. A&M hasn't done it yet. Maybe they're due for one, but I don't think it happens this year.
I agree with you. Well, so we both have 9-3 there. We both have 9-3. That is going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Aggies. Jay, I really appreciate you stopping by. How can everybody check out what you got going on, brother?
Yeah, I have probably too much going on. I'm losing my mind, but you can find me at Coach Jay Arnold on Twitter or X, I guess you can call it now. I still use Twitter. You can find me also on the at Pocketalk_Fest across all forms of social media. That's my bill-paying job that lets me do all this stuff and lets me travel to college football games. You can also find me on an A&M podcast at Aggie War Pod with me and Mike Craven from Dave Campbell's, talking Texas A&M football. And then you can find my national college football podcast at The Get Back Coach. which me and Jake, my buddy, is a Penn State guy, and we talk everything around the country. I'm actually headed up to the Whiteout in September to experience that. And as a college football fan, it's been on my bucket list. So a lot of projects going on. Again, maybe a little bit too much, but I'm looking forward to another busy and fun college football season.
There you go. All right. Once again, Jay, I really appreciate you coming on in today. That is going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Aggies. Everybody have a great weekend, and we will see you on Monday for the beginning of our game week preparation. Have a good weekend, everybody.